Let me ask you first a question that we asked the Democratic candidates last week. In a system where, on the one hand, it seems the General Assembly is all-powerful, and on the other, local school boards fiercely and jealously guard their turf, what is the most important role for the Superintendent of Education to play, and what separates you from the rest of this crowd?
Okay. I just came from the classroom. 3 months ago, I went back after 30 years. I wanted to see, as a parent and as a teacher, where education was in South Carolina. I believe I can work with all people. I ran a presidential committee for disabilities for President Bush, where I had to bring together people. I worked on the Committee on Education and Workforce. And more than that, I've worked in many parts of the electoral process, so I appreciate all those elected officials, from the school board to the General Assembly. And I want to make education a priority in South Carolina.
Mrs. Spearman.
Thank you all, and thank you for watching tonight, and special thanks to ETV for sponsoring this forum for us. I believe that education is about the future of our children, and it's about the future of our great state of South Carolina. And the primary role for the State Superintendent of Education is to be a positive advocate for our children and for education system in our state. As a mother of 2 wonderful children who graduated public schools in Saluda County, I taught school for 18 years in districts across this state, some of the finest with resources, others without. As a legislator, I served on the Education Committee. As an employee at the State Department of Education, I work with folks in business communities across this state, and now for the last 10 years I've been working with all the principals. I have worked at every level of education in this state. We have 8 great candidates, but I think what sets me apart is my experience and the strong relationships that I've built with the people who have the answers. We're going to all have to work together to improve our education system, and I'm ready for that job.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan has the next question.
So as you all know, a bill requiring the review of the Common Core education standards is on its way to becoming law. Since that bill does not guarantee the full repeal of Common Core, which some of you have called for, what would you do as Superintendent of Education to address your concerns about Common Core?
I will start with.
Well, I look forward to working on the rewrite of the standards. We need to bring in outstanding teachers from across our states. We need to communicate better with parents so they will understand. I disagree with some of my colleagues here, though, that everything about the standards was wrong. There are some very good things. Suggested curriculum, I would be sure that we keep in the suggested curriculum of reading Washington's farewell address or President Reagan's speech to the students at Moscow University. And I'd also be sure that we keep in the technical application. We're hearing from our business leaders that our students do not know how to take the facts that they know and put it into application to solve problems. So Cassie, I think that's one of the most important pieces of Common Core that we need to be sure that will be in our new South Carolina standards. That our students don't just spit back facts, but they do know how to problem solve, and they do know how to work together and to collaborate. All the jobs that Governor Haley has brought in, we need to prepare graduates for those new careers in South Carolina.
Mr. Jordan.
So I am a special ed teacher. I was a special needs teacher, and I knew that one set of standards did not fit all students. So when we rewrite our South Carolina standards, I want all students included, not excluded. I worked in Washington, D.C., and I saw that encroaching of their powers, and I always fought that. As state superintendent, I want our parents involved with writing of our standards, as well as teachers, principals, community leaders, and I will fight for our South Carolina state standards. Thank you.
Ron Burnett has the next question, which will start with Ms. Moffley. Ron?
If you ask school boards around the state, most of them will tell you that the legislature should fully fund the EFA-based student cost, which hasn't happened since before the recession. Many of them are looking at raising property taxes, they say, because of state mandates and inadequate state funding. What's your position on EFA funding, and is the state putting enough money in the K-12 system?
Well, it would be nice to have more dollars in school districts, but the reality is the tax revenue is just not there. And I think as school leaders, and certainly as the state superintendent, we have to be very careful to target our dollars on programs that work. The Education Finance Act was written back in the 1970s. It was written in a time when every little town, every community had a textile mill. And those days are long gone. And we piecemeal the EFA for almost 50 years now. So as the next state superintendent of education, I would love to lead the conversation in working on that new funding formula that's simpler, that people can understand, that would direct and target those dollars to the programs that work. But again, I know that school boards, it's a difficult issue to make it all come together, but so is it for our legislators who have so many demands of health care. So as educators, we have to make sure that we target our dollars on those programs that will improve student achievement.
I am not for raising taxes. As a single parent, I knew that every dollar counted. Once my husband died, I had to wipe the slate clean and see where I spent my money. So I am not for raising taxes. But I am for, Nikki Haley had an education reform initiative, what got me into the race. I read it, I thought I could support it because she called for a fairer education funding formula. All classrooms are not the same, and we want to elevate all these classrooms. It took me 6 months to get one computer for my children to use. Also, I believe that as a teacher, I need more than $250 for a materials fee a year. That's what I got. We need more accountability at the local school level and at the State Department of Education so we can get more monies back down to the classroom.
As few philosophical, I think, as fiscal. It's been about 2 decades that the state of South Carolina has struggled to some degree with the concept of what is an adequate level of education. The General Assembly decided minimally adequate was a term that they could work with. The state Supreme Court has heard cases twice now and has yet to come up with a resolution or a decision as to what is the situation in regard to providing an adequate education. So my question really for all of you is, what is your definition of adequate, and what is the role of the state superintendent on this issue? Adequate
to me means that every child in South Carolina has every chance every day, and that when they graduate high school that they're prepared for either college, going to a technical college, or straight into a career and for a successful life. That's really the dream of every parent, every grandparent. In fact, now it says the latest poll is that the top thing that folks around this world want is to have a good job. And we've got to do a better job in South Carolina and make sure that every graduate has that adequate education, the basic of reading, math, science, a love of the arts, whatever they're interested in, that they can engage in and be sure that they go through the full 12 years of school, finish, and go on to a successful career or a successful life and become successful taxpayers in this state.
Ms. Atwater.
Well, I take offense to adequate education. All of our students need good education. I want to go back to Governor Nikki Haley's Education Reform Initiative, where she talks about having reading and reading coaches and reading teachers. Many of our students are not on grade level. Reading is critical to the education success of a child. Many times we pass on students that cannot read. By the time they get in 5th and 6th grade, there are discipline problems. I have a daughter that's doing a Teach for America program here in South Carolina, and I asked her, what is wrong with your students? What do you see as the greatest challenge? And she said, Mom, it's their reading ability. They cannot read on grade level.
Question is from Ron Barnett, and we'll start with Ms. Spearman.
This morning, Governor Haley held a ceremony to sign into law a bill designating the Columbian mammoth as the official state fossil. The idea of naming a state fossil, which was raised by an 8-year-old student, stirred debate on the teaching of evolution and alternative theories on the origin of life, with some lawmakers attempting to insert biblical passages into the bill. What's your view on the state's science standards regarding evolution?
Can I go first? Well, I'm glad that students are involved, and I think it's a lot of fun for them. They learn a lot by bringing their ideas to the state legislature and seeing that through. As far as the state science standards, I believe that we have to teach accurate information to our students, and that involves factual text, factual information. As a Christian, I have taken the responsibility to teach my own children at home about our special beliefs and the creation of the world, and I think that is a responsibility of parents to do that in their own home on religious beliefs. But I believe as far as in the public school system, we need to give factual information to all of our students.
Is that one?
Yes, I support the state science standards, but as a woman of faith, I have always needed my faith. I lost my husband at a young age. He was 40 years old, and I raised my 3 girls as a single parent. And I needed the Lord by my side many times. As a teacher, we do ask that moment of silence. And I know this, as long as we have tests, many students are going to need to say that moment of silence and prayer before they take a test.
So the State Department of Education is in the process of rolling out a new teacher and educator evaluation system that considers, in part, how well students perform year to year. How much should educator evaluations be tied to student performance, and what would you do as State Superintendent of Education to retain and attract quality teachers to South Carolina schools?
Is that water?
As a teacher, I've been going around the state when I announced my candidacy for state superintendent. I asked them about teacher evaluations. They don't like the letter grades. They feel they're in a profession. They don't like A, B, C, D, and F. Teachers also want to evaluate their principals and administration. They want a two-way process. But as a special ed teacher, I'm not sure I like the growth part, student growth, because I never know how my students are going to perform. So I do think that there are many issues still that need to be considered in our teacher evaluation. Regarding quality teachers, we need more quality teachers. I think teachers need a pay raise. If you're going to attract the best and the brightest, South Carolina's going to have to pay more. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to school every day at 6:30. And
Thank you. Ms. Few?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that teacher evaluations should be tied to standardized tests, particularly the tests that will be aligned with the Common Core standards, because the Common Core standards, the children will not do well on any test that evaluates those standards. Obviously, it would not be fair to tie a teacher's performance to those faulty standards. In addition to that, I think that what has happened in public school classrooms is that the whole focus has become about the test. Teachers are teaching to test instead of teaching to children, and that has really hurt the entire education system. So I'm particularly opposed to standardized tests in general, and especially the federal ties to standardized tests, which most people don't understand has been a federal impediment for South Carolina for decades now. We are tied to federal standardized tests through the Title I funds, and it goes back to Republican leadership on the federal level. And it's time for us to stop allowing the federal government to control what's happened in South Carolina classrooms.
Thank you, Ms. Moffley.
I don't agree with using student performance for teacher evaluation. Charleston County, we actually got more money than the state. We got $24 million to study, we call it the Bridge program, how to do teacher evaluations, including student performance, and then pay for performance and value-added measures. And actually, nobody's happy in Charleston County. This is not going to work. Common Core is gone. The Smarter Balance has been pushed out the door. We're going to be looking at a different test for accountability, and I would be suggesting, as part of that committee, that we would look at the Iowa for our request for proposals that the State Budget and Control Board will be doing. But I've sat on many a teacher appeal hearing, and our evaluation that we had presently in the state was adequate. it did an adequate job. I'm actually very much of an adept expert at this point from the hearings that I've sat on. But to recruit, retain, and attract our best and brightest, I think we need to treat our teachers like professionals and pay them the national average.
Mr. Burgess.
I don't buy the premise that evaluating teachers will make schools better. Teachers are not the problem. The system is broken, and we need to change the system itself. Value added, or adding test scores in, is a federal mandate so that we could participate and race to the top. I don't think anyone in South Carolina would want Ernie Duncan type Chicago schools here. They're not a great model. But I will say this as a practicing administrator: give me teachers anywhere in the state, adequate number, regardless of where they were educated, regardless of their evaluation. Give me the worst school in South Carolina, keep the federal government out of my business, the state government out of my business, and the district office out of my business, and we'll turn that school around in 2 to 3 years. We have the best and the brightest now. They're leaving because they have no control in their classrooms. Thank you.
Ms. Spearman.
Well, first of all, Cassie, I believe teaching is very high calling, and it is an honorable profession, and we have to elevate our teachers and support them. I know when I was a teacher, I wanted to get better, and I believe our teachers in South Carolina want to be evaluated, and they want to get good information from that evaluation. But evaluation models should be fair, give good information, and be like a flashlight, not a hammer. And I adamantly oppose what the current administration pushed last year across the state, that our teachers would be evaluated on an A to F model. One of the brightest businessmen in the state said that he would never treat his professionals that way, and we're not going to do that to our teachers if I'm state superintendent of education. I do believe that if we look at student progress as part of that evaluation, that we have to have multiple measures, not just one high stakes test. We've got to reel that back in. We went way too far with the impact of high stakes testing that's running people away from teaching. But we've got to continue to focus on the strengths and weaknesses to give information for teachers so they can improve.
Thank you. We have about 3 minutes left for this evening. There are a lot of you here, so that's what's taken so much time. But thank you for all your answers. Let me ask you a quick question that you'll each have about 20 seconds to answer. If you can do it in a tweet, that's about the right amount of in the past year, we've seen consolidation in the state government, adding some things to the governor's office. The state superintendent of education is an elected office, obviously. The question would be, should it remain that, or should it be an appointed office within the governor's purview? And we'll start with Ms. Cofield.
I'm running because I want to make education a priority and of interest in South Carolina. I want to step back and say, I'll let you know when I'm superintendent of education, if it should be elected or appointed.
Ms.
Well, currently, our state constitution, the only requirement to be state superintendent of education is that you're 18 years old and a registered voter. I think we need to set some standards for superintendent of education that would include a high school, college degree, and experience in education. I personally think it should be appointed, but the real question has to go to the people. I believe the General Assembly should put it on a referendum and let the people of South Carolina decide.